I drove 600 miles for Christmas. Mom slammed the door and said, "Sorry, wrong house." Hours later, my brother sneered. She thinks $68,540 makes her family. I froze the money. By dawn, I had 51 missed calls and 11 threats. You know, some moments are so shocking, so utterly devoid of warmth, they burn themselves into your memory forever. For me, that moment was last Christmas Eve. I'd just driven 600 miles through a blinding snowstorm, my arms laden with carefully chosen, expensive gifts, my heart full of a desperate hope. I stood on my mother's doorstep, the snow crunching under my boots, the cold seeping into my bones, only for her to look me dead in the eye and say, "Sorry, wrong house," before slamming the door in my face. I just stood there, frozen. Snowflakes melted on my eyelashes, mixing with tears I simply couldn't hold back. It was surreal. Growing up in our small Midwestern town, I always thought our family was normal. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. Mom was a nurse, Dad managed the local hardware store. My brother, Ethan, and I shared a bedroom until I was 11, building blanket forts and whispering secrets long after bedtime. Those childhood memories, though, they feel like snapshots from someone else's life now. Everything changed when I was 13. The arguments between Mom and Dad had been growing more frequent, their voices carrying through our thin walls at night. I'd pull my pillow over my head, trying to block out the sound of Mom crying or Dad slamming doors. Then, one morning, I came downstairs to find Mom at the kitchen table, her eyes red, but strangely calm. "Your father's moving out," she said simply, stirring her coffee like she was discussing a change in the weather. "He'll still see you kids on weekends." I remember standing there in my pajamas, my world collapsing, while the toaster popped up with my breakfast as if nothing had changed. Ethan, at 11, took it much harder. He truly believed our family was unbreakable. He stopped talking for nearly a month after Dad left. 2 years later, Mom introduced us to Richard. He wore expensive suits and drove a car that made our neighbors peek through their curtains. He owned 3 car dealerships across the state and lived in a house twice the size of ours. Mom seemed different around him, laughing more, touching her hair nervously, wearing makeup even on weekdays. "He makes me happy," she told us when she announced they were getting married. "Don't you want me to be happy?" Of course, we did. But Richard's arrival marked the beginning of Mom's profound transformation. The woman who had taught me to clip coupons and shop sales started wearing designer clothes. The mother who once made us return birthday gifts that were too expensive suddenly found nothing wrong with Richard buying her diamond earrings just because. At first, the changes were subtle. Mom started commenting on our friends' families, who had money and who didn't. She joined the country club where Richard played golf and began dropping names of important people she'd met there. When I wore my favorite thrift store jeans to dinner, she pulled me aside. "We don't dress like that anymore," she whispered, as if poverty might be contagious. Despite these tensions, I excelled in school. Education became my escape, and I threw myself into academics with everything I had. By senior year, I'd earned a partial scholarship to Northwestern University. Richard offered to pay the difference, but there were strings attached. "Business or pre-law," he said. "No point wasting money on those artsy degrees that won't pay the bills." I chose to take out student loans instead and majored in communications. Mom couldn't understand why I'd choose debt over Richard's help. "Pride won't keep you warm at night," she'd said. Through college and beyond, I worked multiple jobs while building my career. Entry-level positions led to promotions, and by 28, I had become a marketing executive at a respected Chicago firm. Each step up the ladder came through my own efforts, my own merit. I paid off my student loans early and started building savings. The financial independence felt like armor against my mother's subtle digs about my choices. Christmas remained the one tradition that held our fragmenting family together. Even through the tension, we maintained the ritual of gathering at Mom and Richard's house on Christmas Eve. But last year's celebration had been particularly strained. Mom spent most of the evening showcasing their newly renovated kitchen to her friends, while I sat alone with my glass of wine. Richard talked business with his golf buddies, and Ethan arrived late, staying just long enough to exchange gifts before leaving for his girlfriend's family dinner. That awkward Christmas had prompted me to skip Thanksgiving this year. I claimed a work project needed my attention, but the truth was, I couldn't bear another holiday of feeling like an outsider in what was supposed to be my family. Mom had seemed almost relieved when I canceled, which stung more than I wanted to admit. But Christmas was different. Christmas was sacred in our family, even after Dad left. So, despite the growing distance, I requested time off work, packed my car with carefully selected gifts, and prepared for the 600-mile journey from Chicago to their new home in rural Tennessee. "Are you sure you want to drive all that way?" my friend Julia asked. "You could fly and rent a car." "The drive gives me time to decompress," I explained, though the truth was, flying would cut too deeply into the money I'd already spent on gifts. I'd chosen items I knew would impress Mom and Richard, a designer scarf for her, an expensive bottle of scotch for him, and the latest gaming console for Ethan. The day before my departure, I called Ethan to confirm the details. "Mom's going all out this year," he said. "Richard's business partners are coming for Christmas Eve. Just be prepared, okay?" "For what?" I asked, sensing something in his voice. "Nothing specific. You know how she gets around his crowd. Just call me when you're close." That conversation should have been my warning, but I dismissed the uneasy feeling, focusing instead on the possibility that this Christmas might somehow bridge the growing gap between Mom and me. Perhaps my success would finally make her proud. Perhaps this time, I would finally feel like I belonged. The first snowflakes began falling just outside Indianapolis, 6 hours into my journey. By the time I crossed into Tennessee, the flurries had transformed into a proper storm, forcing me to reduce my speed to a crawl. Windshield wipers struggled against the onslaught, and my knuckles turned white gripping the steering wheel. What should have been a 10-hour drive stretched into 14 as I navigated treacherous roads and poor visibility. Almost there, I murmured to myself as I turned onto the private road leading to Mom and Richard's estate. They had moved here last spring, and this would be my first visit to their new home. The property was hidden behind a curtain of towering oaks and manicured hedges, a far cry from the modest suburban house where Mom had raised us after the divorce. The security gate swung open after I pressed the intercom button, and I drove slowly up the winding driveway. The house came into view, a sprawling colonial-style mansion with white columns and expansive windows glowing with warm light. Christmas decorations adorned every possible surface. Professionally installed light displays, life-sized nutcrackers flanking the entrance, and an enormous wreath on the front door. The effect was less cozy Christmas and more holiday showroom. I parked behind a row of luxury vehicles, noticing a catering van among them. Mom had mentioned dinner, but not that it would be catered. I checked my appearance in the rearview mirror, applying fresh lipstick and smoothing my travel-rumpled hair. After 14 hours on the road, I looked exhausted, but there was nothing to be done about the dark circles under my eyes. From the trunk, I retrieved the carefully wrapped presents. The designer scarf for Mom had cost nearly a week's salary, and Richard's rare scotch had required a special order. For Ethan, I'd splurged on the gaming system he'd been talking about for months, but couldn't afford on his teacher's salary. My arms were laden with gifts and my overnight bag as I made my way to the front door, snow crunching beneath my boots. The door chime echoed impressively when I pressed it. Through the decorative glass panels, I could see movement inside, people mingling with drinks in hand, dressed in what appeared to be cocktail attire. My heart sank as I glanced down at my casual travel clothes. No one had mentioned a formal gathering tonight. The door swung open, and there stood my mother. At 54, Patricia Wilson Montgomery looked 10 years younger, her blonde hair professionally colored and styled, her slim figure showcased in an elegant black dress. For a fleeting moment, I saw recognition in her eyes, followed immediately by something else, alarm, then coldness. "Mom, hi. Sorry I'm so late." The weather was terrible and her perfectly manicured hand gripped the door edge. "I'm sorry," she interrupted, her voice clipped and unfamiliar. "Wrong house." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "What?" "Mom, it's me, Autumn." Behind her, a group of well-dressed guests turned curiously toward the door. Richard appeared in the hallway, whiskey tumbler in hand, a look of discomfort crossing his face before he quickly retreated. "Not tonight," Mom hissed quietly, her smile rigid. "We have important guests. I told you we do family Christmas tomorrow." "No, you didn't. We always do Christmas Eve together." I drove 14 hours to, the door closed in my face. Not quite a slam, but firm enough that the message was unmistakable. I stood there, arms still full of gifts, shock rendering me immobile. Through the glass, I watched my mother return to her guests, laughing as if nothing had happened. Numbness gave way to humiliation as I realized a couple walking toward the house had witnessed the entire exchange. They averted their eyes awkwardly as they approached, giving me a wide berth, as if my unwantedness might be contagious. Snowflakes accumulated on the gifts in my arms as I fumbled for my phone, nearly dropping everything in the process. I called Mom first, watching through the window as she glanced at her phone, saw my name, and tucked it back into her pocket without answering. Next, I tried Richard, then Ethan. No answer from either. I sent text messages to all three. "Mom, I'm outside. Please let me in." Richard, "Did Mom tell you I wasn't supposed to come until tomorrow?" Ethan, "Where are you?" "Mom just turned me away at the door." The message to Mom showed as read almost immediately, but no reply came. Richard's remained unread. Ethan showed as delivered, but not yet seen. 10 minutes passed as I stood in the intensifying snowfall, my humiliation turning to anger, then to a deep, aching hurt that settled in my chest. A catering staff member exited through a side door, giving me a curious look as he loaded empty containers into the van. "Excuse me," I called out, desperation overriding dignity. "Could you please tell Patricia that her daughter is still waiting outside?" The young man looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We're not supposed to interrupt the party with messages." Defeated, I retreated to my car, dumping the gifts onto the passenger seat. Tears threatened, but I fought them back, focusing instead on the practical problem of where to go. The nearest hotel was 30 minutes away, and in this weather, the drive would be hazardous. I had nowhere else to go in this unfamiliar town. As I sat with the engine running and heat blasting, I noticed my mother appear at one of the large windows overlooking the driveway. Our eyes met briefly before she drew the curtains closed, erasing me from her view as efficiently as she had erased me from her evening. That's when the tears finally came, hot, angry tears that blurred my vision as I backed out of the driveway. I had no destination in mind, just the desperate need to escape the humiliation of being treated like an unwelcome stranger by my own mother. I drove aimlessly through unfamiliar roads, windshield wipers barely keeping up with the falling snow. My phone rang. Ethan's name lit up the screen. I pulled into the empty parking lot of a closed gas station to answer. "Autumn, where are you?" His voice sounded breathless, worried. "Driving around in a snowstorm because our mother just pretended not to know me," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "She did what?" The shock in his tone was genuine. "I'm not at the house. I was going to come later after Mom's party thing. She didn't tell me you were coming tonight. She didn't tell me there was a party," I countered. "She never said anything about changing our Christmas Eve tradition." There was a pause. "Meet me at Denny's off Highway 41. You know where that is?" "No, but I have GPS. Give me 20 minutes. The Denny's was nearly empty when I arrived, just a few truckers and an elderly couple occupying booths. Ethan was already there, waving from a corner table. At 29, my brother looked older than his years, his dark hair starting to recede slightly, perpetual worry lines etched between his brows. He stood to hug me, and I clung to him a moment longer than usual, fighting back a fresh wave of tears. "I ordered coffee," he said as we sat down. "You look like you need it." "I need something stronger than coffee after what just happened." My hands were still shaking, whether from cold or emotion, I couldn't tell. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit from childhood. "I can't believe she turned you away." "Actually, no, I can believe it. Things have gotten weird lately." "Weird how?" "We talk every week, Ethan. You never said anything was wrong." "Because it's been gradual, and honestly, I didn't want to worry you." He fidgeted with his coffee mug. Since they moved here, Mom's been obsessed with fitting in with Richard's crowd. Country club memberships, charity galas, social climbing, the works. That's not new, I pointed out. She's been like that since she married Richard. It's different now, more extreme. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Did you know Grandpa Earl left her money when he died last spring? I frowned. No. She told me he'd spent most of his savings on medical care, that there was barely enough to cover the funeral. Ethan's expression darkened. That's a lie. He had a life insurance policy worth $68,540. I saw the check. The precision of the number struck me. Why would she lie about that? Because Grandpa wanted it split between all of us. He told me so before he died. Mom. Equal shares. He even wrote it in a letter, but it wasn't legally binding. My coffee sat. Untouched, growing cold. So she just kept it all without telling me? Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. I made copies of everything. The insurance payout, Grandpa's letter, the bank deposit. He slid them across the table. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you. The papers confirmed everything. The insurance payout, the deposit into my mother's personal account, and a handwritten letter from our grandfather expressing his wish that the money be shared among his daughter and grandchildren. My hands trembled as I read his familiar handwriting. There's more, Ethan said quietly. She's been telling people you've abandoned the family. That you're too busy with your fancy Chicago job to visit or call. That's absurd. I call her every Sunday. I send cards for every birthday and anniversary. I know, but her new friends don't know that. To them, you're the ungrateful daughter who's too good for her family now. Even some of the extended family believes it. Aunt Carol asked me last month if you were ever going to make amends with Mom. The injustice of it burned in my throat. Make amends for what? Being successful on my own terms? Not letting Richard dictate my career path? For not playing along with her new identity as the society wife with the perfect life. Ethan sighed heavily. The money changed her, Autumn. Or maybe it just revealed who she always was. She joined that exclusive country club where Richard plays golf. Suddenly she's hosting dinner parties for his business associates, buying art she doesn't understand, and acting like we grew up with silver spoons instead of struggling after Dad left. The waitress arrived to take our order, but my appetite had vanished. I requested more coffee, just to have something to hold on to. So what now? I asked after the waitress left. I've driven 600 miles to spend Christmas with a woman who slammed the door in my face. I can't even go to a hotel because my luggage is trapped in my car under all the gifts I bought for people who apparently don't want me around. Ethan reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Stay with me. My apartment's small, but the couch pulls out. We'll figure this out together. As the reality of the situation fully hit me, tears welled up again. I had spent thousands of dollars on gifts and travel, taken precious vacation days, and endured a 14-hour drive through hazardous conditions, all to be treated like an unwelcome intruder by my own mother. I feel so stupid, I whispered, a tear sliding down my cheek. I keep trying to be part of this family, and I keep getting shown that I don't belong. That's not true, Ethan said firmly. You belong with the people who actually care about you. Mom's the one who doesn't deserve to have you in her life. We sat in that Denny's for nearly 3 hours, Ethan filling me in on all the changes in our mother's behavior over the past year. How she had started referring to Ethan and me as her first family when talking to her new friends, as if we were a practice round before her real life began. How she had redecorated their new home without a single family photo that included our father or our original house. How she had begun criticizing my career choices to anyone who would listen, painting herself as the concerned mother of a daughter who refused her help. By the time we left, the snow had stopped and something had hardened inside me. The hurt was still there, a raw wound beneath my ribs, but now it was accompanied by a cold clarity. For years, I had been chasing the approval of a woman who had chosen status over her own children. It was time to stop running that race. Ethan led me to his modest apartment, helping me bring in the gifts I'd so carefully selected. We placed them in a corner, a sad little pile of expensive peace offerings that would never be opened as intended. Tomorrow, Ethan said as he made up the sofa bed, "We're going to have our own Christmas. And then we're going to figure out what to do about Mom and that inheritance." For the first time since arriving in Tennessee, I felt a small spark of warmth. Not everything was lost. I still had my brother, and perhaps that was family enough. I woke up on Ethan's pull-out couch to the smell of coffee and the sound of him rummaging in the kitchen. Sunlight streamed through windows that had no curtains, illuminating the modest one-bedroom apartment where my brother had lived since becoming a high school English teacher 3 years ago. The contrast between his simple home and our mother's mansion couldn't have been more stark. "Morning," he called, noticing I was awake. "I'm making eggs. It's pretty much all I have besides cereal. Eggs sound perfect." I sat up, wincing at the stiffness in my back from the thin mattress. "What time is it?" "Almost 11. You were exhausted, so I let you sleep." After breakfast, we sat at Ethan's small kitchen table, formulating a plan. Despite my initial instinct to avoid further confrontation, Ethan convinced me we needed to address the situation directly. "She's having her big Christmas Eve dinner tonight," he explained. "All of Richard's business partners and their wives. She's been planning it for months. And do you think we should crash it?" The idea made my stomach tighten with anxiety. "Not crash. I'm still invited. I'll just bring you as my +1. His smile was mischievous. "She won't make a scene in front of her precious guests." I wasn't so sure. After yesterday's door-slamming incident, I wouldn't put anything past her. But the alternative, slinking away without confronting her lies, felt worse. We spent the afternoon preparing. I retrieved my luggage from the car and changed into the outfit I packed for Christmas dinner, a deep green wrap dress that I knew looked good on me. Ethan put on a button-down shirt and the only tie he owned, a gift from his students last year with tiny Shakespeare quotes printed on it. "Ready for battle?" he asked as we stood by his car at 7 o'clock. "As ready as I'll ever be." The drive to Mom and Richard's estate felt surreal. 12 hours ago, I'd been turned away from this very house. Now, I was returning like some avenging spirit, determined to expose the truth. The driveway was even more crowded than the previous night. Luxury cars lined up like soldiers. A valet took Ethan's keys. "They hired a valet for a family dinner?" I whispered incredulously as we approached the front door. Christmas music drifted from inside, along with the murmur of dozens of conversations and occasional laughter. Ethan squeezed my hand reassuringly before ringing the doorbell. This time, it was Richard who answered, his expression shifting from welcome to shock when he saw me standing beside Ethan. "Ethan and Autumn. This is a surprise." His eyes darted nervously over our shoulders, as if expecting to find more uninvited guests lurking behind us. "Merry Christmas, Richard," I said, summoning a confidence I didn't feel. "I hope you don't mind that I came with Ethan. After yesterday's misunderstanding, I didn't want to miss family Christmas." Richard's discomfort was palpable as he stepped back to let us enter. Of course. Your mother will be pleased you could make it after all." The interior of the house was even more impressive than it had appeared from outside. Vaulted ceilings, marble floors, a massive Christmas tree that must have cost thousands to decorate. About 30 people mingled throughout the open-concept main floor, all dressed. Untouched, growing cold. So she just kept it all without telling me? Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. "I made copies of everything. The insurance payout, Grandpa's letter, the bank deposit." He slid them across the table. "I've been trying to figure out how to tell you." The papers confirmed everything: the insurance payout, the deposit into my mother's personal account, and a handwritten letter from our grandfather expressing his wish that the money be shared among his daughter and grandchildren. My hands trembled as I read his familiar handwriting. "There's more," Ethan said quietly. "She's been telling people you've abandoned the family. That you're too busy with your fancy Chicago job to visit or call. That's absurd. I call her every Sunday. I send cards for every birthday and anniversary. I know. But her new friends don't know that. To them, you're the ungrateful daughter who's too good for her family now. Even some of the extended family believes it. Aunt Carol asked me last month if you were ever going to make amends with Mom. The injustice of it burned in my throat. Make amends for what? Being successful on my own terms? Not letting Richard dictate my career path? For not playing along with her new identity as the society wife with the perfect life? Ethan sighed heavily. The money changed her, Autumn. Or maybe it just revealed who she always was. She joined that exclusive country club where Richard plays golf. Suddenly she's hosting dinner parties for his business associates, buying art she doesn't understand, and acting like we grew up with silver spoons instead of struggling after Dad left. The waitress arrived to take our order, but my appetite had vanished. I requested more coffee, just to have something to hold on to. So what now? I asked after the waitress left. I've driven 600 miles to spend Christmas with a woman who slammed the door in my face. I can't even go to a hotel because my luggage is trapped in my car under all the gifts I bought for people who apparently don't want me around. Ethan reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Stay with me. My apartment's small, but the couch pulls out. We'll figure this out together. As the reality of the situation fully hit me, tears welled up again. I had spent thousands of dollars on gifts and travel, taken precious vacation days, and endured a 14-hour drive through hazardous conditions, all to be treated like an unwelcome intruder by my own mother. I feel so stupid, I whispered, a tear sliding down my cheek. I keep trying to be part of this family, and I keep getting shown that I don't belong. That's not true, Ethan said firmly. You belong with the people who actually care about you. Mom's the one who doesn't deserve to have you in her life. We sat in that Denny's for nearly 3 hours, Ethan filling me in on all the changes in our mother's behavior over the past year. How she had started referring to Ethan and me as her first family when talking to her new friends, as if we were a practice round before her real life began. How she had redecorated their new home without a single family photo that included our father or our original house. How she had begun criticizing my career choices to anyone who would listen, painting herself as the concerned mother of a daughter who refused her help. By the time we left, the snow had stopped and something had hardened inside me. The hurt was still there, a raw wound beneath my ribs, but now it was accompanied by a cold clarity. For years, I had been chasing the approval of a woman who had chosen status over her own children. It was time to stop running that race. Ethan led me to his modest apartment, helping me bring in the gifts I'd so carefully selected. We placed them in a corner, a sad little pile of expensive peace offerings that would never be opened as intended. Tomorrow, Ethan said as he made up the sofa bed, we're going to have our own Christmas. And then we're going to figure out what to do about Mom and that inheritance. For the first time since arriving in Tennessee, I felt a small spark of warmth. Not everything was lost. I still had my brother, and perhaps that was family enough. I woke up on Ethan's pull-out couch to the smell of coffee and the sound of him rummaging in the kitchen. Sunlight streamed through windows that had no curtains, illuminating the modest one-bedroom apartment where my brother had lived since becoming a high school English teacher 3 years ago. The contrast between his simple home and our mother's mansion couldn't have been more stark. Morning, he called, noticing I was awake. I'm making eggs. It's pretty much all I have besides cereal. Eggs sound perfect. I sat up, wincing at the stiffness in my back from the thin mattress. What time is it? Almost 11. You were exhausted, so I let you sleep. After breakfast, we sat at Ethan's small kitchen table, formulating a plan. Despite my initial instinct to avoid further confrontation, Ethan convinced me we needed to address the situation directly. She's having her big Christmas Eve dinner tonight, he explained. All of Richard's business partners and their wives. She's been planning it for months. And do you think we should crash it? The idea made my stomach tighten with anxiety. Not crash. I'm still invited. I'll just bring you as my +1. His smile was mischievous. She won't make a scene in front of her precious guests. I wasn't so sure. After yesterday's door-slamming incident, I wouldn't put anything past her. But the alternative, slinking away without confronting her lies, felt worse. We spent the afternoon preparing. I retrieved my luggage from the car and changed into the outfit I packed for Christmas dinner, a deep green wrap dress that I knew looked good on me. Ethan put on a button-down shirt and the only tie he owned, a gift from his students last year with tiny Shakespeare quotes printed on it. Ready for battle? He asked as we stood by his car at 7 o'clock. As ready as I'll ever be. The drive to Mom and Richard's estate felt surreal. 12 hours ago, I'd been turned away from this very house. Now, I was returning like some avenging spirit, determined to expose the truth. The driveway was even more crowded than the previous night. Luxury cars lined up like soldiers. A valet took Ethan's keys. They hired a valet for a family dinner? I whispered incredulously as we approached the front door. Christmas music drifted from inside, along with the murmur of dozens of conversations and occasional laughter. Ethan squeezed my hand reassuringly before ringing the doorbell. This time, it was Richard who answered, his expression shifting from welcome to shock when he saw me standing beside Ethan. Ethan and Autumn. This is a surprise. His eyes darted nervously over our shoulders, as if expecting to find more uninvited guests lurking behind us. Merry Christmas, Richard, I said, summoning a confidence I didn't feel. I hope you don't mind that I came with Ethan. After yesterday's misunderstanding, I didn't want to miss family Christmas. Richard's discomfort was palpable as he stepped back to let us enter. Of course, of course. Your mother will be pleased you could make it after all. The interior of the house was even more impressive than it had appeared from outside. Vaulted ceilings, marble floors, a massive Christmas tree that must have cost thousands to decorate. About 30 people mingled throughout the open-concept main floor, all dressed. Picked up on the third ring. Autumn Wilson, he said warmly. Merry Christmas. This is unexpected. Merry Christmas, Martin. I'm sorry to bother you on the holiday. Nonsense. What can I do for you? I took a deep breath. I need to know about my grandfather's life insurance policy. The one that paid out to my mother earlier this year. There was a pause. I see. May I ask why you're inquiring about this now? Because I just found out about it yesterday. Mom told me there was no money left after Grandpa's medical expenses. Martin's sigh was audible through the phone. I was afraid something like this might happen. Your grandfather was very clear about his wishes, but unfortunately, he didn't make them legally binding. So she had the right to keep all the money. Legally speaking, yes. The policy named your mother as the sole beneficiary. However, your grandfather left a letter with me expressing his wish that the proceeds be divided equally between your mother, you, and your brother. I provided that letter to your mother when the insurance paid out. My grip tightened on the phone. And there's nothing that can be done about it now? Well, Martin said slowly, that depends on what you want to accomplish. The money is legally hers, but if there's evidence she acknowledged your grandfather's wishes and agreed to honor them, we might have grounds to challenge her control of the funds. What kind of evidence? Emails, texts, recorded conversations where she confirmed she would split the money. Anything that shows she recognized your claim to a portion of the inheritance. I thought of the copies Ethan had made, the insurance document, Grandpa's letter, the bank deposit. I need to check with my brother, but I think we might have something. What would be the next step? If you're serious about pursuing this, we could file for an emergency injunction to freeze the funds until the matter is resolved. It's an aggressive move, especially on Christmas, but if you're concerned she might spend the money quickly. She's already spending it, I said, thinking of the lavish Christmas party and the clear signs of extravagant living. How quickly could this happen? I could file the paperwork electronically today. It's Christmas, so a judge might not review it until tomorrow, but given the circumstances and the relatively modest sum involved, we might get lucky. By the time I met Ethan for breakfast at a local diner, I had made my decision. We compared notes on what evidence we had, and Ethan revealed the crucial piece, a text message from Mom, sent 3 months ago, acknowledging that she would take care of Grandpa's wishes soon, in response to Ethan asking when we would receive our portions of the inheritance. That might be enough, I said. Martin thinks we can at least freeze the money while the legal questions get sorted out. Ethan pushed his eggs around his plate. Are you sure you want to do this? It's going to make the rift with Mom even worse. What rift could be worse than her telling me I don't belong in the family anymore? That money makes her family, and I'm not part of it. The pain was still fresh, those words echoing in my mind. Besides, this isn't about the money. It's about her lying to us, hiding Grandpa's wishes, and using his inheritance to fund her social climbing while telling everyone I've abandoned the family. You're right, he sighed. I just hate that it's come to this. After breakfast, I called Martin back and gave him the go-ahead. Within an hour, he had emailed me documents to digitally sign, and by early afternoon, the emergency petition had been filed. All we could do now was wait. Back at the hotel, I tried to salvage some semblance of Christmas spirit. Ethan and I exchanged the gifts we'd brought for each other, a leather messenger bag for him, a pair of wireless headphones for me. We ordered Chinese food and watched It's a Wonderful Life on the hotel TV, trying not to think about the family dinner happening across town without us. My phone rang around 6. It was Aunt Carol. "Autumn, honey, how are you holding up?" "I'm okay. Better than expected, actually. I've been thinking about you all day. I want you to know I had no idea what Patricia was doing about the inheritance or the things she's been saying about you. None of us did." Her support brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you, that means a lot. I couldn't stay at that dinner last night after what I heard." I told Patricia exactly what I thought of her behavior and left. Several others did too once they understood what had happened. A small, petty part of me was gratified to know Mom's perfect Christmas Eve had been disrupted. I filed legal paperwork today, Aunt Carol, to freeze Grandpa's insurance money until this gets sorted out. "Good," she said firmly. "Dad would be horrified by what she's done. He adored you, Autumn. You know that, right?" After we hung up, I checked my email and found a notification from Martin. The judge had reviewed our emergency petition and granted the temporary freeze on the funds. It would remain in place until a hearing could be scheduled in the new year. As if on cue, my phone began buzzing with incoming texts, all from my mother. "What have you done? The bank just called about a freeze on my account. How dare you do this on Christmas?" Then a call from Richard. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. "Autumn, this is unnecessary and harmful to your mother. We need to discuss this like adults. Please call me back so we can work this out without lawyers." More texts from Mom followed, alternating between rage and manipulation. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? I was going to share the money eventually, when the time was right. You're breaking my heart, Autumn. Is this really what you want? Your grandfather would be ashamed of you." That last one stung, but I knew it wasn't true. Grandpa Earl had been kind and fair his entire life. He wouldn't have wanted his money to become a weapon. "Block her number," Ethan suggested when I showed him the messages. "At least for tonight. Give yourself a break." I couldn't bring myself to block her entirely, but I did silence the notifications. Whatever resolution would come, it wouldn't happen tonight on Christmas. Later that evening, as Ethan dozed on the hotel room's second bed, I opened my laptop and found an email from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in months. "Hey, Autumn. I heard what happened with Aunt Patricia. The family group chat is blowing up. Just wanted to let you know most of us are on your side. Aunt Carol told everyone about the inheritance thing and how Aunt Patricia has been lying about you. It's not right. Anyway, if you're still in town and want to come to our place for leftovers tomorrow, you and Ethan are welcome. No pressure, just an offer. Love, Jamie." For the first time since arriving in Tennessee, I felt a genuine smile cross my face. I had lost one family connection, but perhaps others could be strengthened in its place. As painful as this Christmas had been, it had revealed truths that had been hidden for too long. And maybe that was a gift in itself, the gift of clarity, of seeing people as they truly are. I closed my laptop and lay back on the hotel bed, watching the blinking lights of the sad little artificial Christmas tree in the corner of the room. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, at least, I could rest knowing I had stood up for myself and for what was right. The week between Christmas and New Year's Eve passed in a strange limbo. Instead of returning to Chicago as planned, I extended my hotel stay and took advantage of my company's flexible holiday policy to work remotely. Ethan had offered his couch again, but I needed space to process everything, and he needed a break from the family drama to spend time with his girlfriend, who had returned from visiting her parents. My mother's initial barrage of angry messages had given way to a calculated silence. Richard, however, called daily with increasingly generous settlement offers, each one presented as a magnanimous gesture rather than an acknowledgement of wrongdoing. "Your mother is willing to give you $20,000 if you'll drop this legal nonsense," he said during his most recent call. "That's more than your share would have been anyway. "This isn't about the money, Richard," I repeated, a phrase that had become my mantra. "It's about the principle and about the lies she's been telling about me. People say things they don't mean when they're upset. You know how your mother gets." But that was just it. I didn't know how she got. I had spent my entire adult life making excuses for her behavior, convincing myself that her conditional love was better than no love at all. The events of Christmas Eve had finally forced me to see the truth I'd been avoiding. My mother's love came with terms and conditions I could never satisfy. On New Year's Eve morning, my hotel room phone rang, an unusual occurrence, since most people contacted me on my cell. It was the front desk. "Miss Wilson, there's an elderly lady here asking for you. A Mrs. Eleanor Wilson. She says she's your great-aunt." Great-aunt Eleanor was my grandfather's sister, a woman in her 80s whom I hadn't seen in years. Curious and a little concerned about what could bring her out in the winter cold, I asked the desk to send her up. She appeared at my door minutes later, a tiny figure bundled in a red wool coat, her white hair perfectly set despite the wind outside. "Autumn, dear," she said, accepting my hug with surprising strength for someone her age. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion. Carol told me you were staying here." "Not at all. Please come in. Can I get you some coffee or tea?" "Tea would be lovely." As I prepared the hotel room's modest coffee maker to heat water, Aunt Eleanor settled into the room's only armchair, removing her gloves with deliberate care. "I've been hearing quite a story about Patricia and Earl's insurance money," she said without preamble. "Is it true she kept it all for herself?" I nodded, pouring hot water over the tea bag in a paper cup. "She did. And she told me there was no money left after Grandpa's medical expenses." Aunt Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. "That doesn't surprise me as much as it should. Patricia always had champagne taste on a beer budget, as my brother used to say. When she married that car dealer, I warned Earl she might change." She accepted the tea with a nod of thanks. "I didn't come just to gossip about your mother, though. I brought you something." From her large handbag, she retrieved a worn leather photo album. These were Earl's. He would want you to have them. The album contained photographs I had never seen before. My grandfather as a young man, his wedding to my grandmother, my mother as a child, and then toward the end, pictures of me and Ethan with Grandpa Earl, fishing trips, birthday parties. Ordinary moments preserved in fading color. "He was so proud of you," Aunt Eleanor said, pointing to a photo of me at my high school graduation, Grandpa beaming beside me. "He told everyone how you earned that scholarship on your own merit, how you worked all those jobs to put yourself through college without taking a penny from Richard." Tears pricked at my eyes. "I didn't know that. Earl understood the value of making your own way. It's why he left that insurance money to be split among you all. He wanted to give you a boost, not a crutch." She patted my hand. "Your mother never quite grasped that distinction." We spent the next hour looking through the album, Aunt Eleanor sharing stories about my grandfather that I had never heard, how he had started his own business with just $50 borrowed from a friend, how he had turned down a lucrative job offer because it would have meant uprooting his family, how he had quietly paid college tuition for a neighbor's son when the family fell on hard times. "Your grandfather believed family was about support, not control," she said as she prepared to leave. "Remember that, whatever happens with Patricia." After she left, I found myself drawn to the window, watching the preparations for New Year's Eve celebrations in the park across from the hotel. Families setting up picnic blankets, teenagers throwing frisbees, couples walking hand in hand, ordinary people living ordinary lives, unaware of the dramas unfolding around them. My phone rang. Martin Greenberg, our lawyer. "I have news," he said after we exchanged pleasantries. "The judge has scheduled a hearing for January 5th. But more importantly, I've been in discussions with your mother's attorney." She hired an attorney? Somehow, this made everything more real. Yes. And here's the interesting part. Her lawyer has indicated she might be willing to settle, to divide the money as your grandfather intended, if we can keep this out of court. Why the sudden change of heart? Martin's voice took on a diplomatic tone. "It seems several family members have expressed their disappointment in her actions, and there may be some concern about how this would look to her new social circle if it became public. In other words, The threat to her carefully constructed image was more persuasive than any moral argument could ever be. "What do you think I should do?" I asked. "Legally, we have a decent case, but litigation is expensive and emotionally draining. If she's willing to do the right thing now, even for the wrong reasons, it might be best to accept." I promised to think about it and hung up, my mind churning with conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted the validation of a legal victory, but another part just wanted this chapter closed so I could move forward. As evening approached, my phone rang again, an unexpected caller. "Autumn, it's Richard. I'm downtown. Could we meet for coffee, just the two of us?" Curiosity overcame caution, and I agreed to meet him at a cafe near my hotel. He was already there when I arrived, looking older and more tired than I remembered from Christmas Eve. "Thank you for coming," he said, standing awkwardly as I approached the table. "I ordered you a latte. You still take those, right?" I nodded, surprised he remembered. "What's this about, Richard?" He sighed heavily, running a hand over his thinning hair. "I wanted to talk to you away from your mother. To explain some things." Over the next hour, Richard painted a picture of my mother I had glimpsed but never fully understood, her desperate fear of returning to the financial insecurity of her childhood, her obsession with maintaining appearances among his wealthy business associates, her panicked reaction when the insurance money arrived. Not greed, he insisted, but terror that it wouldn't be enough to secure her future if anything happened to me. "She's not a bad person, Autumn. She's scared. She always has been." "Fear doesn't justify lying," I said. "Or keeping money that wasn't just hers to keep. Or telling people I abandoned the family. No, it doesn't." For the first time, he looked me directly in the eyes. "I should have said something when she started spreading those stories about you. I should have corrected them. I'm sorry I didn't." His apology, unexpected and seemingly genuine, caught me off guard. Richard had always been a peripheral figure in my emotional landscape, my mother's husband, not quite a stepfather, certainly not a replacement for my dad. Yet here he was, showing more insight and remorse than my own mother had. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I've watched Patricia lose herself these past few years. The woman I married was kind, despite her insecurities. She loved you kids, even if she didn't always show it well." He stared into his coffee cup. "The money changed her. Or maybe it just amplified what was already there. Either way, I don't like what we've become." As we parted ways outside the cafe, Richard awkwardly extended his hand. "Whatever you decide about the inheritance, I hope you'll consider keeping the door open. At least a crack. Not for Patricia's sake or mine. For your own." I walked back to my hotel through streets filling with New Year's Eve revelers, their excitement a stark contrast to my contemplative mood. Richard's words echoed in my mind, competing with Aunt Eleanor's stories about my grandfather and Martin's practical legal advice. By the time midnight approached, I had made my decision. I would accept the settlement offer, divide the inheritance as Grandpa intended, and donate my portion to the literacy foundation he had supported for years. The money that had caused so much pain would do some good in the world, and I would close this chapter with as much grace as I could muster. As fireworks exploded over the park, illuminating my hotel room in brief flashes of color, I raised a glass of cheap champagne from the mini fridge. To new beginnings, I said to the empty room. And to letting go. 3 months after that fateful Christmas, spring had begun to soften the Tennessee landscape. Dogwoods bloomed along the highway as I drove to the courthouse for what would hopefully be the final resolution of our inheritance dispute. The legal proceedings had moved slower than expected, complications arising when my mother initially balked at the settlement terms. In the end, though, the judge had reviewed all evidence, including Grandpa Earl's letter, the text messages acknowledging his wishes, and testimony from Aunt Eleanor and other family members, and ruled in our favor. Today was merely a formality, the official division of the insurance proceeds into 3 equal shares. I hadn't seen my mother since Christmas Eve. She had refused mediation sessions, communicating only through her attorney. According to Ethan, who still lived in town and occasionally saw her at family functions, she had become more withdrawn, her social calendar notably less busy as news of our dispute rippled through her carefully cultivated circle. The courthouse was quiet that morning, just a few lawyers and clients moving through the cavernous hallways. I spotted my mother and her attorney near the designated conference room, her posture rigid, her gaze fixed straight ahead. She wore a conservative navy suit, her usual jewelry conspicuously absent. "Hello, Mom," I said, approaching them with Martin at my side. She nodded stiffly, but said nothing. The proceedings themselves were anticlimactic. Papers signed, accounts verified, perfunctory congratulations from the attorneys. My mother maintained her silence throughout, signing where indicated without comment. Only when everything was complete did she finally meet my eyes. "I hope you're satisfied," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't about satisfaction," I replied. "It's about honoring Grandpa's wishes. Your grandfather didn't understand the realities of my situation. Maybe not, but he understood the importance of fairness." She gathered her purse, preparing to leave. "Richard tells me you're donating your share to that literacy foundation." I nodded, surprised she knew. Grandpa believed in their work. Something flickered across her face, respect, perhaps, or merely surprise. "Well, that's your choice." "Yes," I said simply. "It is." That brief exchange, mundane as it was, represented the most civil conversation we'd had in months. As I watched her walk away, I felt an unexpected lightness. The anger that had fueled me through the legal battle had gradually dissipated, replaced by a calm acceptance of what our relationship had become and what it would likely never be again. Outside the courthouse, spring sunshine warmed my face. I had taken a week's vacation to handle the legal matters, but instead of immediately returning to Chicago, I had plans to stay with Ethan for a few days. Our relationship had deepened through this ordeal, weekly phone calls evolving into genuine friendship beyond our shared childhood memories. "How'd it go?" Ethan asked when I arrived at his apartment that afternoon. "Surprisingly peaceful. She didn't fight, didn't argue. Just signed the papers and left." "That's not what I expected." "Me neither." I settled onto his couch, the same one I'd slept on that Christmas night. "I think she's tired of fighting. Or maybe Richard talked some sense into her. He called me last week, you know. Asked how you were doing." That evening, Ethan and I met Aunt Carol, Aunt Eleanor, and several cousins for dinner at a local restaurant. What had begun as a small family rebellion against my mother's behavior had evolved into a monthly tradition, a way of maintaining connections that had been neglected for too long. "Have you thought about what you'll do next?" Aunt Carol asked as we shared dessert. "With your mother, I mean." "I'm not shutting the door completely," I said after considering the question. "But I'm also not chasing her approval anymore. If she wants a relationship, it has to be built on honesty." "That's wise," Aunt Eleanor nodded. "Boundaries are important, even especially with family." The concept of boundaries had been central to my therapy sessions over the past months. After returning to Chicago following Christmas, I had finally sought professional help to process not just the recent trauma, but the years of conditional acceptance that had shaped my relationship with my mother. Through those weekly sessions, I had begun to understand the pattern we had established, my desperate attempts to earn her approval, her increasingly impossible standards, both of us trapped in roles that brought neither happiness nor growth. My therapist, Dr. Levine, had introduced me to the concept of the grief of recognition, the painful process of acknowledging that the parent you wish you had doesn't exist and never will. That grief had felt overwhelming at first, but gradually, it had become manageable, then transformative. Accepting my mother for who she actually was, rather than who I needed her to be, had freed me from expectations that could never be met. The day before I was scheduled to return to Chicago, I received an unexpected text from my mother. "I've put some of your childhood things in a box. Richard can drop them off at Ethan's if you want them." It wasn't an apology or an olive branch, exactly, but it was something. An acknowledgement of my existence, at least. I texted back a simple, "Thank you, that would be nice." Richard arrived the next morning with a cardboard box. "She found these when we were reorganizing the storage room," he explained as he handed it over. "She thought you might want them before they got thrown out." Inside were photo albums from my childhood, school projects my mother had saved, my high school yearbooks, and a small jewelry box containing the necklace my grandfather had given me for my 16th birthday, an item I had thought lost during one of their moves. "Thank you for bringing these," I said, genuinely touched by the gesture, however small. Richard shifted uncomfortably on Ethan's doorstep. "She's seeing someone. A therapist, I mean." It was my suggestion after everything that happened. I can't say she's had any major breakthroughs, but it's a start. That information stayed with me on the flight back to Chicago, a complicated emotion somewhere between hope and skepticism taking root. I didn't expect dramatic changes or tearful reconciliations, but maybe over time, something healthier could grow from the ashes of our old relationship. Back in my Chicago apartment, I set up the photo albums on my bookshelf and placed my grandfather's necklace in my jewelry box, small pieces of my history reclaimed and reincorporated into my present life. That evening, I called Ethan to let him know I'd arrived safely. "I've been thinking," I said after we caught up. "What if you came to Chicago for Christmas this year? We could start some new traditions." "I'd like that," he replied. "Actually, Melissa might come too, if that's okay. Things are getting pretty serious between us." "Of course it's okay. The more the merrier." After we hung up, I sat by my window, watching the Chicago skyline sparkle in the evening light. The city that had once represented my escape now felt like home in a way it never had before, not because I was running from something, but because I had chosen it, claimed it as my own. The journey from that snowy Christmas Eve to this moment had been painful, revealing truths about my family and myself that had been long buried. But through that pain had come clarity, and through clarity, healing. I had learned that family wasn't defined by blood or money, but by respect, honesty, and genuine care. Some family connections had been broken in the process, perhaps irreparably, but others had been strengthened, and new ones formed. As for my mother, only time would tell if our relationship could be rebuilt on healthier ground. I was no longer waiting for her approval to feel complete, no longer measuring my worth through her eyes. Whatever happened between us going forward would be between two adults making conscious choices, not a child desperately seeking validation and a mother withholding it. The inheritance that had sparked this transformation had, in the end, been about much more than money. It had been the catalyst for confronting long-buried truths, for breaking destructive patterns, and for finding the courage to define family on my own terms. In that way, perhaps it was exactly the gift my grandfather had intended all along.